What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Swift tutorial. Today we're going to be taking a look at a UI page view controller, and what it allows you to do is set up these really slick looking animations where you can flip through multiple view controllers in this page curl format here. So you can see the animation is actually super cool. I'm a big fan, and you can supply content for each of these pages via different view controllers. So we'll set up the data source, take a look at the delegate, take a look at actually feeding in different text for each of these controllers, or any content for that matter. So that said, make sure you smash that like button down below for the YouTube algorithm. Get excited. If you're new, welcome. Hit subscribe. Get Xcode ready. Let's jump right in. Quick pause before we get into the video. If you haven't seen it already, I am hard at work putting together iOSacademy.io, a community where all of us iOS engineers can come together, learn how to build some of the top apps like Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, in addition to interview prep to land some of these iOS roles at top tech companies. So if you're interested in the free and premium content to come, head on over to iOSacademy.io and enter your email address in the waitlist form, and you will be notified as content becomes available. That said, let's get into the video. Let's get started by creating a new project. We're going to stick with a single view application template, and let's call this My Page Turner. Save it to our desktop, and let's jump right in. So the very first thing we want to do is understand the mechanics of a UI page view controller. So let's create a function where we can create that view controller. So we're going to create a function called present page VC. And in here we want to create a page view controller. So we'll say let VC is a UI page view controller. And we're going to want to present this view controller after we do some setup with an animation. And the important thing to understand about a UI page view controller is that it's a container controller that manages one or more other view controllers. So what I mean by that is we are going to start by calling a function on here called setViewControllers, which takes an array of controllers, a direction, so we're going to say forward, an animation, we'll say true, and a completion, we'll say nil. And basically what this UI page view controller is capable of doing is allowing a user to swipe through or flip through, similar to the iBooks app on an iPad where you're flipping pages, through multiple controllers. And all it asks us to do per its public interface is supply those controllers. And the page controller does all the work of the nice animations and the ordering and all that jazz. So instead of creating this controller like this in the simplest capacity, if we open up the first parenthesis, you'll see that there are a number, let's spell this correctly, you'll see there's a number of constructors. And the one that we want is this long one down here that takes a variety of parameters. So this way we can control some specifics about it. So for this first parameter, we're going to put in page curl. For navigation orientation, we're going to say horizontal. Options, we can just say nil or supply any options. We'll just omit options for now. The other thing that I want to call out here that we want to do is supply a data source for our page view controller. The essence of the way this works is we want to supply one controller in this array that our page view controller can use to begin the setup and the render, and then the data source will supply the next controller, or the previous when the user is flipping to the next page or the prior page. So let's do that. So we're going to create a conformance up here to UI page view controller, and we're going to do the data source and the delegate just so you guys can see both are available to you. And we're going to say this VC has a delegate of self, and it also has a data source of self. The other thing we're going to do is create a property on here called myControllers, and it'll be an array of UIViewController objects. And to begin with, in viewDidLoad, let's simply add a general view controller in here so you guys can see what this looks like, and then we'll get into some customization of the implementation. So we're going to set a basic background color of red, and we'll append it into here. And let's see, what else do we need? We're going to have, what's their error here? Let's see. We're saying myControllers, this is a variable. We're trying to append a UIViewController. Shouldn't be an issue. We should append VC rather. And we're going to have an error up here because the data source requires two functions like so. And before we implement these, let's move these down to the bottom of the class just to be a little more organized. And let me also expand my Xcode window to give ourselves a little more room to work. Basically, these two functions, if we read the name, so PageViewController for the top one, ViewController before, and the bottom one, ViewController after, expects us to return the ViewController to be shown in the PageViewController based on the current position. So this function, if it gets called, it wants the controller that should be shown before the parameter that's sent in. And if there is none, we can return nil. You can see the return type is ViewController optional. And the flip side of it, if the user is flipping to the next page or the next controller, it's going to ask us, hey, give us the next controller after this one. So we're going to implement these in a second the correct way. For now, let's simply just return nil and nil. And let's also get the first controller out of this guy, which is the one we're appending here, in this function by saying guard let first equals this dot first else return. And then this first we can throw into this collection. And before we run the app, let's implement viewDidAppear, call super viewDidAppear, pass an animated. And we're basically going to call this function with a delay. We could optionally add a button and use an IB action, but I'm going to be lazy today and use a delay block. So async after now plus 2 seconds. Okay, cool. So basically what we expect to see is after 2 seconds, a page view controller should be presented, and it should have this first controller, which is the first controller that we're putting into our array in viewDidLoad. It has this colored background, so that's what we should see. Now, in this case, when we start flipping or attempt to flip, no flip will occur for 2 reasons. One is we're returning nil in here, and the other is we only have one view controller that we're putting into here in this viewDidLoad function. So let's hit Command R to build and run and see what we get and see if I broke this or not. So app launches, we should see a page view controller pop up. Its first controller is the red one, so that's all we see. If we click and drag in either direction, nothing happens, no page flip. We can swipe down to dismiss it. So let me put in one more controller in here. And you will notice that we can flip to that controller. So let's see, we put another view controller here. Let's rename this to be VC1, VC1, and VC1. And what we want to do in these functions is implement them as follows. So in the view controller before, it's going to basically pass in a controller. And what we want to first do is find the index in the array of this controller. So we're going to say guard let index is going to be myControllers. And we want index rather first index for this item, and I believe this returns optional. If we can't find it, we'll just return nil. And the other thing we're going to say is if this index is 0, we'll also return nil. And the reason is if the index is already 0, it's the first thing in the array, so there's no view controller prior to it. Otherwise, what we're going to return, we're going to take our index minus 1 from it, and we're going to return my controllers passing in before. So basically, we're going to take the view controller that's coming in via the parameter, try to find the index of it in our collection. The assumption we're making here, because we're using first index, is that we have no duplicate controllers. Once we find that index, we'll make sure it's greater than 0, because we can't have a -1 index position, and we'll subtract and we'll return it. So similarly, for the view controller after function, we are going to paste that in, Control I to fix your indentation, and in here we want to find the first view controller for the parameter coming in. We want to make sure that this index is less than my controllers.count -1. So in other words, we want to make sure the index is not the last index in our array. And if that is the case, we are going to call this after. Instead of subtracting 1, we will add 1. And then finally, we'll return the controller in the array at that position. And let's change this to be after. And I believe we can hit Command R to run. Let's see if we have any errors. Looks like we don't have any. So we're going to get our controller presented. And when we start flipping, you'll get this really nifty page animation. And this is actually exactly what Apple uses on the iPad for iBooks. And I mean, I keep saying iPad, but even on iPhone here. And you'll see we get this green one. And we try to flip further. Nothing happens because there's no more pages in our controller array. But if we try to flip back, you'll notice we can flip back. And this magic of figuring out which controller comes after or before is being done by us here. But the page view controller is able to do the animation, the memory management, and basically the glue that makes this super slick. So before we actually wrap this video up, I wanted to create a more real-world example for our controller here. So for example, if you wanted to create a book-style controller, so in other words, each of these controllers would have text on it, what you would do is reuse one controller in multiple capacities. So let's actually build out that example super quickly, and you guys will see what I mean. So I'm gonna come up here. We're gonna create a new file. It'll be a Cocoa Touch class, and it's gonna be a subclass of a view controller. Let's call it text view controller. Keep that box unchecked for the nib. We're going to delete all this jazz. And let's see, what else are we going to do? We are going to override the initializer on this controller. Call super.init. And we want to call super.init with this one and pass a nil. And let's see, what else do we want to do? Actually, we don't want this initializer now that I think about it. What we want is a custom initializer like this. And we can say with text, which will be a string. And in here, we can call super.init with the inib name passing in nil. We are going to create a property on here called myText. It'll be a string. And we're going to say self.myText is our text that is coming in. So basically, this controller can be configured with our own text. Additionally, what we want to do is create a text view on here. And I'm going through this example fairly quickly to demonstrate a real-world application of a page view controller. So if you're not familiar with text views and all that jazz, not to worry. I think I've got other videos on this already posted, and I've got more in-depth ones coming soon. So is editable will be false. And I'm also going to change the font size of this to be system font of size 24. And we're going to say text color will be black. Additionally, we're going to say my text view dot text equals self dot my text, like so. In view did load, we are going to add this as a subview. Self.myTextView is what we want. And let's see, view did layout subviews. We just want to set a frame for the text view. So we're going to say myTextView.frame is view.bounds. So it'll take up the entirety of the screen. And I believe that should be it. So if you hit Command B, looks like we've got an error in here. So let's see what we messed up. Let's see, we're overriding view did load. Oh, it also wants, if we add an initializer, it wants also this required coder initializer. So you can hit that and hit fix, and it'll automatically bring it in for you. Now, if you hit Command B, you'll see that it compiles. Now let's just go and use this controller. So let's head back to the view controller initially that we were working on. Let's get rid of all of this, and let's create some controllers. So what I'll do is I'm going to create an array of let's call them pages, and this will be an array of strings, and we're going to iterate over this array, and each time we're going to create one of these controllers with the given text, and we're going to pop it inside our array up here. So we're going to say this dot append vc, and let's put some text in here. So the first text we'll do is chapter 1, and I'm just going to copy and paste this a bunch so it fills up the screen so you guys get the point. So I'm just going to hold Command V for a little bit, like so. And let's copy and paste this. So let's do that. Actually, let me change this. So let's make this chapter 2. Copy and paste for a little bit. Get some duplicate text. Let's do chapter 3. And I think we could stop at chapter 4. I think that'll paint the picture. So this is one of my favorite controllers. It gives you a lot of control over how things look and feel with fairly minimal effort. So it's a good balance of building something cool and not having to think through every minor detail, aside from setting it up, of course. So basically we've got our array here. If you hit Command B, it looks like it's complaining at us because we have 2 equal signs. Let's fix that. Zoom out a little bit for you. Hit Command B, and this is working. We should be appending our 4 controllers based on these 4 entries here, and none of this logic needs to change. So let's hit Command R and see if anything breaks. So we should get our presentation. So here is our first view controller. Looks like our framing is not the best for this text view, but if we start flipping the page, you'll notice behind here we have chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, and we can flip no longer. If we try to flip back, we get chapter 3, 2, and 1, and we can't go further back. So there you go. That's how you use a page view controller. Actually, I lied. There's one more thing I want to show before I wrap up this video. If you command click into the delegate for the page controller, you'll notice that there's some events in here, some event functions. So you can get various things outside via the delegate. So will transition to, did finish transitioning, did finish animating, So my point is there is a couple of delegate functions in here that you can use to get more events about this page view controller, and you can use that to trigger more functionality. So you can imagine, let's say you are showing some data that you fetched from online, and you want to have like pagination, for example. Let's say after the first 10 pages the user has flipped, you want to go and get more data. You can use the delegate function to go ahead and do that. So you don't need to fetch everything up front. So that's about it. I guess I'll wrap it up there. If you haven't, hit that like button down below. Don't forget to absolutely destroy it. Helps out the YouTube algorithm and all the videos. Helps me make more videos for all of you. If you enjoyed the video, hit that subscribe button. If you have a question, comment down below. I try to reply to every single question within a day or two at the absolute max. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.